Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler, and today we're talking about a rom-com that proves love can happen at any age, even when you're 40 and still figuring it out. That's right, we're breaking down the number 21 film on our 50 best rom-coms list, The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Steve Carell's breakout role had us all cringing, laughing, and rooting for his character Andy as he fumbles his way through some seriously awkward, yet oddly sweet moments in his quest for love. We've got a lot to unpack today, hilarious antics, a killer ensemble cast, and surprisingly heartfelt life lessons hidden in all the chaos. I'm super excited to invite first-time guest and the mogul of movie podcast, Caleb Masters. Is that a good title for you?
Mogul, wow, man, set the bar high. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah. But I'm flattered. Thank you very much for the invite, Nathan. What a pleasure. Always down to talk movies, especially with people like you who are just very deeply passionate and like to celebrate movies. Yeah, right. Looking forward to the combo.
Yeah, so Caleb and I, we don't really know each other like super well, but we have a mutual friend who kind of was like, hey, you like movies and you like movies, hey, you guys should meet. And so anyway, and so I've really tell people about your podcast.
Yeah, so I run a website called the Cinematropolis.com, and we're just a website based here in Oklahoma City, dedicated to thoughtful conversations on film. So we have a lot of written content that's a little more analytical. What I spend, and frankly at this point, mostly it's other people writing for my website. What I spend most of my time doing outside of sort of coordinating different written contributions is hosting our podcast, the Cinematic Schematic. And what we do is we're covering a slew of new releases. Sometimes we go for the big blockbusters. So gosh, like earlier this summer, we did one on like the Fall Guy, Deadpool and Wolverine. We do the big ones, but we also try to hone in on some of the smaller ones. We did a review on Maxine. I know we've got a couple of more independent horror films coming up later this year that we're looking forward to. So we try to get the whole gambit of new releases generally. I also, as much as I can, try to give a platform to a lot of more independent, especially locally independent filmmakers. So we recently did a double interview with Chris Oz McIntosh and Jacob Leighton Burns, each who had their own short films playing at the Northern Hollywood Film Festival. But in addition to that, we do like Dead Center Film Festival interviews to try to capture mostly reviews, but also talk to filmmakers is sort of it. But the goal is really to make the conversations thoughtful, analytical, and hopefully you'll laugh and walk away thinking about things maybe a little differently than you did before you tuned in.
Yeah, and it's very great from the episodes I've listened to, and it's also especially you being kind of plugged into not just the film scene, but kind of what's happening in Oklahoma right now, and talking to the films that come through the festivals and the filmmakers and stuff like that. It's really cool. So it's Thanks. Especially with the state of Oklahoma, just knowing that there's such great talent that's coming through our state. It's pretty neat.
It's an exciting time to be really into film here in Oklahoma. I mean, of course, we had over the summer, Twisters was a huge box office hit, and that was largely, I think it was almost entirely shot here in Oklahoma, largely in Oklahoma City proper. So there was, it's great to see that I saw some names in the credits that I recognized, and these are people who have been, frankly, a lot of them hustling for a very long time, but now the projects are getting bigger. Thanks to tax incentives, Hollywood's got its eyes turned on us here in Oklahoma a little more. So there's just a lot more projects and a lot bigger budget projects that are starting to make their way through, and gives an opportunity for our local folks to sort of either showcase their talent with a larger production or take what they've learned on larger production and put it into their own independent films.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I know you're kind of covering a lot of this new stuff. So hopefully this is a little fun, kind of maybe looking back on a film that, has been out for such a long time. But also I kind of want to apologize that this movie, just being the subject matter that it is, kind of an odd film to ask somebody to come jump on and talk about when we don't know each other super well. So hopefully it's not too awkward.
No, not at all. I mean, frankly, I've never So I've been talking about movies for a long time, but I've definitely never talked about this movie on a podcast.
Okay.
And it does provide an interesting window into what was life like before I talked about movies all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's to me like way back. And so that was kind of fun revisiting it. The journey was, oh, that's fun. Oh, that's ooh. Oh,
Yes.
there's a lot of mixed feelings around it, but I did find it to be a really interesting film to revisit.
Yeah. Well, that was a great setup. So, yeah, let's cut to the trailer to the film.
Are you a virgin?
Oh, you are hilarious. This is good.
You're a virgin!
How can you go 40 years and not have sex? I just kind of stopped trying.
We gotta help the man. We cannot let you go on being a virgin. I'm sorry. You gotta highlight your attributes. Just wax that whole Teen Wolf thing off.
No! Kelly Clarkson! Help! I hate you! Stop smiling!
You look like a man-o'-lantern.
The 40-Year-Old Virgin is a 2005 romantic comedy that centers around Andy Stitzer, played by Steve Carell, a lovable but socially awkward 40-year-old who's never had a romantic relationship. When his coworkers find out about his inexperience, they take it upon themselves to help him, quote-unquote, solve his problem. Along the way, Andy navigates some hilarious, cringe-worthy situations, but ultimately finds love in a refreshingly genuine and heartfelt way. The film was directed by Judd Apatow, making his directorial debut. Apatow is known for blending raunchy humor with sincere, emotional moments, and The 40-Year-Old Virgin is a perfect example of that style. The movie stars Steve Carell, who co-wrote the script with Apatow, alongside a strong supporting cast, including Paul Rudd, Seth Rogen, Romney Malco, and Catherine Keener, who plays Andy's love interest, Trish. I'll also like to insert Leslie Mann and Jane Lynch as well, and even Mindy Kaling in there.
I had totally forgotten she was in this movie. Quickly, there was about half the cast, or well, they were usually the smaller roles, but I was like, oh, and you're here, and you're here.
Yeah.
Holy cow! I guess I didn't realize you were who you were at the time.
Yeah. Well, even Jonah Hill has a very small part, and then even Kat Dennings, who's done a lot of stuff as well, but. Yeah, since this release, it's achieved a classic status, and we'll talk about this in the rom-com genre. It's often praised for its mix of crude humor, and surprisingly tender moments, and helps solidify Steve Carell as a leading man in Hollywood. The film was also a huge hit, and I remember that even when this movie came out, grossing over 175 million worldwide, and is still beloved for its quotable lines and memorable scenes. And I'd like to add, if anybody is a fan of The Office, the success of this movie is the reason The Office continued. So, yeah, because it was the first season of that show was 6 episodes. And then this movie came out that summer after, and it was on the fence of whether or not NBC was going to pick it up. And it made Steve Carell a star, and it really is a credit to why The Office became so successful, because it was about to get axed. So all that said, I mean, I have a lot of questions for you, but did you see this when it first came out?
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory. I'm not here to date myself one way or the other, but I will say my parents were fairly protective of what I was allowed to watch when I was younger. Now, I wasn't that young when it came out, but it was still one of those, I couldn't exactly watch it at home. And I guess the opportunity never came around for me to watch it, because I think this came out when I was in high school, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think the opportunity ever came for me to watch it, so I didn't see it until way after it had been a hit. I was at college and I watched it just because it's one of those movies with your college buddies, and so I remember it being a hit, not being on that train, being really curious about it for a while, and then eventually catching up with it, and I really enjoyed it when I saw it for the first time, probably I don't know, circa 2009, 10, somewhere in there. So it's a fun time. I also distinctly remember, to your point, that I'd never heard of Steve. I think Steve Carell had made an appearance in Bruce Almighty in a small bit role.
Yes, yeah.
Before this, and that was the only other thing I'd ever seen him in when I was that I could recall at the time. So this really was a film where after it came out, he became a much bigger deal very quickly. But yeah, I guess the other thing I should say just about sort of my background here is I'm a big Judd Apatow fan.
I am too.
And again, from a young age, he did Heavyweights, which was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid, 1995. And even though this is a radically different movie, you can kind of see the same kinds of humor in a different, much cleaner way in that movie. But like, you're looking at like Funny People is a movie I love, Super Bad. I think he's tied to Trainwreck. I mean, he's done a lot of really Pineapple. I don't. He didn't direct Pineapple Express, did he? But he knows David Green, but he produced it though. So I mean, a lot of movies he was affiliated with, I was a pretty big fan of. So this is actually one I kind of came to later. And it was probably for the better for it.
No. So yeah, I'm a little bit older than you. So I graduated from college in 2004. So this came out in 2005, and I would say this movie what kind of hit the sweet spot. Like for my, I mean, I think it's definitely a movie that I still think is hilarious to this day, but especially that post-college life. I mean, the sense of humor here just hit to, all not necessarily what I was experiencing in life, but especially with Andy and his friends that are in here. I mean, that was kind of the group that I was coming from Baylor and had a group still. And though I thought Apatow has always been good at, particularly with this film, I think is capturing the dynamics between friendships and in particular guy friendships. So not that I never had guys quite at the level of this, but the way more so like the banter and how just my relationship with my friends, we've always given each other like a hard time, and just that relentless nature that you have and the back and forth and stuff like that. And so I think he has just this ability. And I mean, a lot is made of like how he just lets the camera roll, it's a lot of improv and stuff. And you can definitely feel that even in sometimes where scenes don't work also. But I feel like he's able to capture that transition from real life talk to the screen where it doesn't feel so much like a movie talking at you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, he's able to. So I think his movies are just he's great at reflecting on life and just how funny life is. And I mean that genuinely. Like, This Is 40 is another one where that's just a fun movie about a very specific moment in your life. And he does a great job at that in all of his films. It feels, obviously it's scripted. Obviously there's lots of improv, but you kind of feel it. There's something about it that feels sincere that I appreciate. Especially we've been probably for the last 10 years in a very like ironic kind of chapter of comedy. It's nice to kind of look back at his films where it's like, yeah, people are wearing their emotions on their sleeves, even if some of the things they're expressing might not fly today. You're like, well, you can sense the truth in the story and the comedy in that moment they're trying to capture. I'm glad you mentioned that post-college experience, because I actually worked at Best Buy part-time right after college, trying to find your first big gig. And I resonated that really does click. I mean, a little later, the experience of you have like your work friends you get really close to, and things get out of control sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and not that he intended to. I mean, all movies are right. Like they're a time capsule, even if they're like even capturing different moments in time. But if somebody was happening to take any kind of history class and they have a section on electronics and the history of electronics, this is the film to go to, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is just like,
plasma TVs.
Yeah, plasma TVs. But, they're talking about VHS tapes, but and then also, I mean, there's even a point where he threatens his friends to turn them in for stealing the re-recordable CDs. And I was like, oh my gosh, this movie definitely it's kind of fun to watch it in that way for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, speaking of CDs, there was just a moment earlier this week I couldn't find a CD-ROM that would play a CD I had. It's crazy how this film doesn't seem like it's that old, even though I know it's coming up on 20.
Yeah,
but so much has changed, especially in terms of like technology in that period. It's kind of hard to imagine what things were like. Oh yeah, I got my CDs I'm burning, or burning DVDs I can lend to my friends.
Yeah, yeah, like even I mean, there's been occasional times where girls have gone into a Best Buy with us, but like, yeah, certainly that time where there was like Circuit City, and yeah, there was definitely, and the room that they kept going back to, the like closed in room where you could like hear all the sound and stuff like that.
Yeah. We called that. We had like a Magnolia room like that at Best Buy where they had all the decked out AV, and you close the doors and it was pseudo private. Yeah.
It's crazy, but yeah. So it's funny watching this movie for the 50 best rom-coms list, because honestly, I have always thought of this as pretty much a straight up comedy. Like in my head, I've always, I haven't thought about it as being a rom-com because the movie is so much about Andy. But definitely watching it this time, kind of with that lens, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, it is, but I feel like it's so much about this man's like personal journey. I don't really loop it into the rom-com area.
It's tough. It's got a lot of rom-com sensibilities about it, but I guess the romance is really, it doesn't really show up until the third act. I try to think of this movie as, if you're going to look at it as a rom-com, you have to sort of think of it as how one man's exploration into his sexuality or sexual experience is the gateway into having meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
And if you think about it that way, I can kind of see the argument, but I'm kind of, that's me sort of playing devil's advocate, because I tend to side with you. It really is just a comedy with a little bit of the romance sort of playing into the story at the very end.
Yeah. I do think, a big thing that he brought, I mean, there's always been a history of raunchy comedies, but what is really this like sweetness factor to Andy and to the story, because I do really like how he, we're kind of laughing at him, but we're really like not really. It's more of the scenarios that he's put in, and I like that they show him as kind of a pure guy, and that like, he's just not into these certain things that his other friends are into. And I like how he wants this for himself, but he's also doesn't, when he starts basically doing things outside of his personality or even his own moral code, it just really bothers him. And I think I connected with Andy on that level, and still do.
Well, and the movie kind of comes back around to some extent, and kind of calls the guys out, or at least a couple of the guys out, for being kind of scummy, So like there is a rigidity to him that I think, again, that's part of his journey, is how to ease up, or how to, be more comfortable with these sort of like gray spaces in terms of being yourself around women. But in general, I think the movie kind of sort of, at the end of it, you kind of feel like he had a lot right. He just had this one area he needed to work on, whereas his friends at the beginning are just kind of like totally just throw him to the ringer.
Yeah. So it helped. It kind of made me remind me of a time I had a buddy who had a softball team, and occasionally he would call me just to come in as a sub when they didn't have enough people or whatever. And so it was this one time. So I didn't know anybody on the team, and this was only a couple of years ago. But anyway, so there was basically the beer drinking between the two games, like in the parking lot, and we're sitting there. And so these group of guys that were around were a little bit younger, probably about the age of what these characters are in this movie. And some of the stories that they were telling, I was just like, my cheeks were turning red. And I was like, I just had to laugh. I was like, you all have had a different life than I've had. And so I think that's very much Andy in the scenario of this movie.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It is kind of funny though. I mean, I think back to that, the scene where they all learn about how he's a virgin. They're all playing cards and they're all swapping stories, and they're like, oh man, you've definitely seen, like, they just assume you've seen some crazy, a guy like you, straight laced, you've definitely done some stuff. Tell us about it. What's the worst you got? And he just like the way he just talks around it, they're like, oh. That I did think that was a fairly believable. Again, that's the truth in the comedy, where if that scenario were to occur, I feel like that's almost exactly how it would play out.
I dated this girl for a while, and she was really a nasty freak. She just loved to get down with sex all the time. She was like, any time of day, she was like, yeah, let's go.
It was interesting. I'm a big Apatow fan. I've seen most of his films. It's been a while since I've seen this one. You can definitely tell this is like one of his first feature films, because I did feel like in that scene in particular, I thought it was real funny, but the way it was shot and staged, I was like, I think I could have shot this scene.
It definitely felt a little bit like the made for TV setup, where it's just a dark room, very basic card table. The lighting was kind of weird. Yeah.
And even some of the other scenes too, just the scenery, to me, it almost felt like it was lifted from a Saturday Night Live set and like placed in certain areas. I was like, oh, I can definitely like seeing some of his films lately where he started getting kind of a budget where he could start playing a little bit more. So yeah. But I also had to laugh because I'm a huge Survivor fan, and I love the underlying joke of just revolving life around Survivor and watching it with his upstairs neighbors. And it's also a little crazy that it's not as relevant like it was back then, but the fact that the show is still like one of CBS's most popular shows is kind of funny.
Still nominated for Emmys. I just watched Discover This Sunday. Not only that it was still on, but it's still getting Emmy nods. So yeah, it's still around.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Some things never change.
Yeah. So, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, all the performances here. Touch a little bit on how you felt about how Steve Carell did on this film, but also the other cast.
Well, this is great. This was a good, and you already know this. He's sort of like a big coming out for him in terms of like people discovering him and that he can be really funny. He'd sort of been in a lot of much smaller bit roles before this, but this was the movie where he got to be on full display. Here's my deadpan humor. Here's how you can utilize me as the hyper straight man in all these wildly uncomfortable scenarios. We saw this in The Office, of course, and I really feel like that was another component or aspect of him that they ratcheted up over the seasons of The Office. And he's great in this movie. His performance still holds up. His sort of cluelessness really is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
The others are interesting. This wasn't the beginning of their career, but Paul Rudd and Seth Rogen definitely joined this movie on their ascent into fame. Number one, Paul Rudd really doesn't age, guys. He really doesn't. He looks exactly the same. It's kind of nuts. Yeah. It's that sunscreen, I guess. Yeah. And Seth Rogen as well. You see a lot of his comedic sensibilities kind of shine through. He's still got that same laugh, that it's almost like an iconic weird laugh. I can't replicate it.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Well, it's just funny, so you're seeing these guys sort of back in the day doing the thing they're still doing now, but they've honed their craft so much. But here it feels a lot more like, again, improv, fast and loose, a little more, I don't want to say organic, but you can tell they're still trying to figure it out a little bit in terms of like what they bring to the table. I was actually pleasantly surprised by Romani Malco. I thought as Jay was super funny. I completely forgot about that character in the movie.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say it's kind of funny because I definitely always knew him from this movie, and he also kind of played definitely a smaller role, but it was the movie with Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, where Baby Mama, maybe.
Baby Mama,
like
yeah.
But anyway, we watched. Did you ever watch that the TV show on ABC, A Million Little Things?
No,
that he was on. Well, very serious like drama and often dealt with the suicide, and it's basically about these group of friends who had a friend who's committed suicide, and it started off good, but kind of went into this like crazy melodramatic like arc. But he's in that show, and so that's the thing I've seen him in most recently. So it was kind of funny to see this, probably like where his roots truly are in this movie. So,
back when he still did comedies, apparently. And he crushes it. I actually think some of the funniest moment, like I don't know about lines specifically. He has a lot of those, a lot of really great moments in the movie that I found myself laughing at.
Yeah, I would have to say. Well, obviously, you mentioned like Paul Rudd had been around, but like I think Apatow leans on him quite a bit. I feel like maybe he had a little bit more experience than the other cast. I might be off there, but he definitely kind of gives him a little bit more I use a pedestal to stand on as a term he uses a lot in this movie. So yeah.
Not to be confused with the pussy pedestal, also referenced in this movie.
Yeah.
But no, I think he does. I guess he has the most meaty subplot outside of Andy's character. David has the whole thing with his ex-girlfriend broken up. You know, they all kind of have a little bit of an arc, but I feel like his is probably the most substantial.
Yeah, yeah. The other ones are they're kind of there more just for extra laugh or so. But I mean, everybody's had that friend who's hanging on to a short-term relationship much longer than they need to. In Paul Rudd's character,
just nails it. Yeah, also, was Elizabeth Banks showed up, right?
Oh, yeah.
I totally forgot she was in this movie. That was a nice little surprise.
I know, it's crazy. So we talked about a little bit how some of the jokes definitely, even though this movie isn't quite 20 years old, how things have just seemed like out of touch, especially with the how I know you're gay joke, and that sort of thing. But there's certain things with that, but like overall, like, do you feel like this movie holds up? Like,
man, it's tough. I don't think so. I think the performances hold up really well. I don't think the script holds up, and there's a couple of reasons for that. There's a little bit of the vaguely homophobic or just upfront homophobic jokes they have that I definitely wouldn't get told today. There's also that one reference, the transvestite sequence or sequence with the railing on trans people, and I was like, that probably wouldn't work today either. And then there's the last thing which is, and again, this movie is about a man from a man's perspective, but I also just think we're living, not to bring up divisive topics, but I just feel like sitcoms from a male's perspective, pre-Me Too and post-Me Too, are a lot different.
Oh, yeah.
Men are talking about women and all that. It's one of those things where I'm like, I see it. I see why it was the way it was. I see why it was appealing, even, to everyone at the time. And it was just kind of like a lot of these jokes felt like okay until a lot of women said, maybe it's not great. That does not take away from the fact that I think the characters are actually very memorable. Again, I actually think Andy is hilarious in general, just again, how they utilize and put him in all these uncomfortable scenarios. And I do, as I already mentioned, like the performances, you get to see these character actors really shine. It's mostly just some of the script and a lot of the jokes that I think have aged pretty poorly.
Yeah. I think it's almost more so this movie definitely brought, and you mentioned all the movies that he directed and also produced. I mean, it really kind of shifted comedy in a different direction for sure. And so even though I do feel like if somebody came in with fresh eyes, even a younger person watch this, kind of the out of date jokes aside, I think they would see this and kind of be like, wait, why is this style so like innovative? But really at the time when it came out, it was really different from what we were getting for sure.
Well, and honestly, there aren't, especially even at the time, there was not a ton of rated R comedies like this. Usually sitcoms or comedies, like kind of like studio programmers, would come in at the PG-13 because then they can appeal to as wide an audience as possible. So again, even at the time, I do think the R rating was a little risky. Given the subject matter, how could it not be rated R? But also, they really went for it.
Yeah, and an almost 2-hour runtime as well, which was especially back then pretty unheard of for a comedy.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think this movie has some pretty memorable scenes. Were there any that really stood out to you this time?
Yeah, I noted a couple down here because there were some that really got me. And honestly, it's funny as a lot of them aren't even the sex jokes. So for example, this one's pretty early in the film. It's from it's the scene with David, played by Paul Rudd. And the quote I got here is, "I got to tell you something. I'm really excited about it. For the first time today, I woke up, I came to the store, and I feel confident to say to you that if you don't take this Michael McDonald DVD that you've been playing for 2 years straight off, I'm going to kill everyone in the store and put a bullet in my brain." I laughed. I died. It's kind of dark humor, but also I worked in Best Buy. You know how many times I saw the Guardians of the Galaxy 1 trailer? You know how many times I could quote the trailer? I could probably do it right now. Like you just get used to watching the same stuff over and over and over again for demo purposes, right?
Yeah.
So I know that was. I have a couple more, but I mean, what about you? Is there any in particular that stick out to you?
Well, I this scene in particular, I mean, it's probably one that people remember the most, but I almost even frame it like in a marketing perspective. But the whole hair waxing scene is just hilarious to see. But also, I thought this movie was, and I even remember brilliant in how it marketed itself, because one is it's a very famous movie poster, and so it was very unique. But two, I mean, I know that this scene was played in the trailer, and it probably drew a lot of people coming into the theater, but especially when he yells out Kelly Clarkson. I mean, that was like, you know, yes. but the way he stares down the lady who is doing it and the things he says to her. I mean, just so funny.
Oh, so, and it gets better the longer it goes on. It just gets the insults get better and better.
Yeah. And I love you know, probably at the time I didn't think it was as funny, but I thought it was more funny now. But when he first picks up Leslie Mann at the bar and they're in the car together, and she's driving under the influence.
Yes.
Just how that all plays out. Just, it just made me really laugh this time. I don't know if it was just it being so irresponsible. But,
oh yeah. Yeah. No, I think it was just the irresponsibility. And then the fact that she's driving, like, it's just a funny scene because the whole setup is this is a bad idea, right? And he just because he's like, I think this is what I got to do to like get laid, so I guess I better do it. And she seems into me, even though she's a drunk girl, so maybe he's actually the one taking advantage of her ? But in that scenario, it's just like he's like, what have I gotten myself into? And it just gets worse and worse. And oh my gosh, I just want to live.
I love that pivot too, because of like, I mean, she's clearly drunk like at the bar, but you know, there's still a level of like, oh yeah, this is like, this kind of hot moment. And then just how I think with anybody who gets super drunk, you know, it's like you go over like a little hill, and then how she just starts, you know, talking about like what she ate, and just how all the like sexiness just like gets wiped away completely.
Yeah. I was like, I need to go stop it. I need to get some French toast to the drive-thru or something like that. Oh man, it was so funny.
Oh man, but yeah. What were some of the others that you had written down?
So another one is just the line here. You know what? I respect women. I love women. I respect them so much that I completely stay away from them. It's just that's a snapshot of the movie.
Yeah,
right? I love it.
Yeah, even I mean, if it's just one of those, and Apatow, he's been a writer forever, but just a little line when he finally admits that he's a virgin, and he's like, he says something like, "Yeah, I've always been one," or something like that. Just really clever.
Movie Musings.
I promise not to get into like awkward territory here. So, but the first question I had for you is there anything that you collect? So famously in this movie, Andy has his action toy, you know, collection, or
man, it's a shame I didn't use a different camera angle, because I'm looking at a very large collection of all sorts of different things. I got Funko Pops, I got books, I got video games. I have a whole shelf in the other room, and I don't know, maybe I should be ashamed of this, but I have a whole bunch of I'm a big Nintendo fan, so I collect they're called like amiibos, but it's basically like Nintendo action figures that you can use the game. I have not all of them, but I have a bunch of them on a shelf, any that Zelda related in particular. So I collect all sorts of stuff that's nerdy geeky.
How did that transition into when you got married?
Well, surprisingly, I hit the jackpot and married a woman who was cool with it. She's like, as long as you can make it look neat and presentable, great. If you can't, it's going in the garbage. So when we moved into the house, she also was gracious enough to give me a room that has lots of space for shelving and whatnot. I have a couple of bookshelves, so I have gotten rid of some of the stuff, but you know, I've been able to keep a surprising amount. Probably due for another cleanse here soon, though.
Yeah.
But
That's
she's all supportive about it. So I again hit the jackpot.
Yeah,
To be fair though, anytime I started dating someone, I was always like super worried when I brought them over. I'm like, is this gonna be the scene from 40-Year-Old Virgin where you're just embarrassed to talk about it? Super have to be honest and transparent. That was a very real feeling.
Yeah. I like when she comes to his apartment and she goes, "You never got carpet." Oh, so funny. So you kind of mentioned this. It says you worked at Best Buy, but I was going to ask you what your favorite electronics store was.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I didn't really shop at many others other than Best Buy, and there's not exactly a plethora of them around anymore. Circuit City, I guess, was one for a while. Yeah, I like Best Buy. The marketing's cute. They have a strong brand. I'm very sad that they very recently, I think at the beginning of this year, actually stopped selling Blu-rays and physical media in terms of movies. That was a pretty heartbreaker because I still, even up until they stopped doing it, just walk through the aisle every time I was there just to see if there was anything on sale. And usually I'd walk out with a couple of extra DVDs. And I think the way they display their TVs is great. So
Yeah. So they didn't sell electronics so much, but especially people that are close to me growing up in my hometown of Longview, Texas. And there was one here in Stillwater, but it closed down as well. But I was a big fan of Hastings.
Love Hastings. The bookstore. But it's a bunch of stuff in it.
Yeah, it was like basically the epitome of what I enjoyed. It was movies, books, and music, and very like three like different sections. And so and it's even though, but it even got to a point where I was like, this store is not very tangible, like even for me. Like anymore to go into. But the joke was I even as a high schooler, sometimes I was mistaken for somebody that worked there, but I would still end up helping them because I knew where all the things were. So
man, I could tell you there were days, especially before I could, like when we would go up to, because I grew up in a small town, when we go to a bigger city and my mom would do shopping in the mall, I would just say, drop me off at Hastings. And I just sit in probably the comic book section or I couldn't watch the movies. I'd look at the movies, but probably the comic book section, the novel section, fantasy section. And I would just read for 2 or 3 hours, hopefully finish something and put it back on the shelf.
Yeah. So a third question, not like super related to the movie, but I do think it's kind of funny in that moment where he chooses to watch Everybody Loves Raymond instead of the other options that he has at his disposal. But do you have like a favorite sitcom like that like you're just like, oh, if it's on, I'm gonna watch that?
Well, this one's barely. I don't know if it would be considered a sitcom. I really like Community. I'm a big fan of that show, just because I think that the premise is pretty great in terms of like the community, a goofy, out of touch community college. But I love how, especially once you get to like season 3, how much it starts to play with the genre in terms of like you have like a Western episode, you have like a psychedelic episode, you have a murder mystery episode. And they have like paintball episodes. There's a couple of those, and they're all like riffing on a different sort of action movie of some sort. And then on top of that, the characters are just very, very likable and enjoyable. So that one's a little more recent. It's not the sitcom. It's definitely a different kind of sitcom than Everybody Loves Raymond. But it is one that anytime if I'm ever looking for something to turn on, it's when I watch.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one.
How about you?
Oh, I do. Maybe it's because I like stage plays too, but I've always loved old, like traditional comedies like that. Recently with Hallie, we watched Modern Family with her,
nice.
Which was a lot of fun. We've been watching The Big Bang Theory with her, which is enjoyable. I know that's not everyone's like cup of tea, but kind of has some correlation to this movie, I guess, a little bit with some of the geekdom and nerdom there and stuff. But we're kind of like we're a sucker for those TGIF sitcoms, even though that there's like no credence to them. But I will say, if we were at a hotel, and when you're like actually looking at a channel guide, I more often than not land on Seinfeld. It's always been
Seinfeld's a good one.
yeah, one of my favorite shows. And so that one always, it's always good for a good laugh.
It's reliable, man. And if I was going to throw from my younger years, I definitely liked Boy Meets World growing up. That's one that I've rewatched it several times. Not recently, but that's another really, really fun one. It's a little more traditional.
Yeah.
Maybe more modern.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Feeney. And I definitely had a crush on Topanga. That was
everyone. Yeah. Number one crush. Yes.
Rom-Com Rankings.
But the first one, so we kind of talked a little bit about it was kind of interesting this being deemed as a rom-com. But how did you feel about the romantic chemistry between the leads here? And I don't know if we even mentioned her by name, but Catherine Keener plays Trish in this movie, who owns the we sell things on eBay.
It was the eBay store. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, how from 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, how would you rank this chemistry?
Yeah, I would say 3, and here's why. I don't. In some ways, I feel like they have no chemistry.
Yeah.
But also, I think I'm giving it the 3 because they're both kind of. How do I say this without being mean? They're kind of weird. They're both kind of unique individuals, and their lack of chemistry is also part of the chemistry. So, like, that makes for a fun dynamic. It does not feel especially romantic, but it does make for some fun tension, in my opinion. So I would go 3 hearts there.
Yeah, you were a little nicer than me because I gave it a 2. Really kind of almost based on even the things that you said, but all that said, I think Catherine Keener is great in this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, for what she's given to do. I've always really enjoyed her as an actress. Now it kind of ties back into, Apatow, especially early on in his career, writing for women and stuff like that. So there's a lot here, and maybe this is watching it with older eyes where there's almost, to me, I feel like a lot of stuff left on the table of maybe things they could explore, because even to the fact of like, wait, does Andy want to be a father to, is it 3 children? Like, yeah, 3 kids. So, there's kind of some weird stuff there. It does kind of seem like a relationship of convenience of some sorts. But I can buy into how she likes him because he's sweet, because there is like this like wholesome nature that he has that is honestly like hard to find. And I think maybe, someone who's been like, has had a rough past or something like that, you can see how they're drawn to that person. But even though, spoiler alert, we do get a wedding scene, if we weren't shown that wedding scene, I don't really know how Andy and her would
how they'd
really
work out. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like, again, from a writing perspective, I kind of see the idea that she's the one he falls for, or they fall for each other because she's the unlikely one. There's all these other women that he meets, and she seems like the least likely in some ways, which makes her the perfect choice from the story's perspective.
Yeah.
Like, again, the chemistry is that they don't really have chemistry, in my opinion. So
yeah.
That's kind of like they're 2 unlikely paths cross. Okay,
Yeah.
that happens sometimes. But yeah, the wedding scene felt you're like, sure, right.
Yeah. So the second category I have are the best friends. So I think definitely this more so than some of the other movies on the list, Andy has a lot of people behind his or in his corner in this area. We've talked a little bit about the supporting cast, but how would you rank this aspect here?
Okay, so I want to maybe I've got 3 different competing thoughts here. So
Okay.
let me just lay them out. Number 1 is, if you ask me when I saw it in college, and especially that period when I'm working in Best Buy right after college, I probably say 4, maybe even 5 stars. I'm like, yeah, these guys are looking out for him. They're the best friends ever. And now I'm in the year 2024, and all of that stuff feels kind of icky a lot of the time. And I'm like, actually, maybe not. I mean, well-intentioned friends, maybe not best friends. But I will say, the movie does do, it does, by the end, sort of show how all of those guys kind of have their own problems, no matter how much they seem to have it together with their sex life at the beginning. They're all kind of a mess too. So I do think it does critique them enough that I would say, ask me today, I'll say 3 stars. But I
Okay.
would have said 5 because I do
Okay.
think they are a lot of fun to watch. And on paper, as a dude who has people rooting for you, I mean, they're the best and better than most movies.
Right. Yeah. So I'm there with you on that. I gave it a 4 just because ultimately I think their heart is in the right place, and just from I think from a character perspective, like with all these characters, even if they have these one lines, whatever, I think Apatow does an amazing job of like, you clearly know these characters and making them different from one another. Especially, you have to keep in mind, a lot of people didn't know these Seth Rogans, at the time and that sort of thing. Yeah, but definitely, what was there, were they motivated, not by what was best for Andy, or just helping him achieve what he wanted to achieve? Yeah, it's kind of yeah, but definitely memorable for sure. But I'm with you. I probably would have thought they were better friends back in the day than I do now. So
I mean, in terms of like loyalty, they're definitely 5 stars. And again, they're just looking out for him.
Yeah,
trying to help him out. But
right.
in terms of like actual ethics, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So did you have a chance to listen to the soundtrack, which is the third category?
Yeah, I listened. Well, I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I listened to several tracks, and I did look at the full list. I mean, I gotta go. I'm 2 stars, 2 hearts on one. I honestly, I mean, there's a couple of good ones in here, but I did not find it particularly memorable. And I think an important thing to note was I had to go listen to the soundtrack separately.
Yeah,
because I didn't really. None of the music moments really landed for me outside of that one with Jane Lynch. That tells me it's not a very strong or memorable soundtrack. The fact that I had to look it up and see what was on it after the fact, like, oh yeah, I guess that was somewhere in there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say I've always had a tender spot for yacht rock, and
Sure.
This soundtrack very much fits that mold for sure. It is a little interesting. I do think listening to it, I was like, oh, this is definitely the music Apatow grew up listening to, because it's a mix of this like late 70s, early 80s type of thing. But I also I enjoyed listening to it. And then also I feel like some of the songs are like, you didn't remember Hello by Lionel Richie?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's like that's one of the ones that you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I guess that was in the movie. And it's a very memorable song. I like it, but it was okay. Yeah. I don't know listen, you can disagree if I'm being too harsh on it.
Oh no. I totally get why it's not, but the theme, the montage that he has in the theme from, what was the show, like American's Greatest Hero, but believe it or not, I'm walking, like that whole thing. Yeah. I almost wouldn't know that song if it wasn't for this movie, and probably maybe they do a little bit on it on Seinfeld. George Costanza sings it in the episode. So anyway, but no, music with all things, it is, I don't know if music or comedy is more subjectable to the,
they're both very subjective. Absolutely. And it's one of those where it didn't really, none of the hits really connected with me when I was watching the movie. So that doesn't mean it's bad music, and that doesn't mean necessarily it's a bad soundtrack, but for me, it was not a strength. Doesn't ruin the movie by any means though.
Yeah. Okay, so most rom-coms, the fourth category, they have a chase scene or a declaration of love. I thought this movie definitely had that moment, and it was even where I was like, oh yeah, I guess this is a rom-com. But how did you rank that one?
I do 4 hearts on this one. I thought it was again, given the fact that the rom-com part doesn't really start until the last act of the movie, it maybe felt a little rushed, but it was really, really sweet. He basically is in the car accident, and he's like, well, does his confession, and they start kissing, and he's like, I was waiting for you. It was just it was a sweet moment. I put a grin on my face and warmed the heart. And what more can you ask for, really?
Yeah. I gave it 3 because honestly, even though I'd seen this movie many times, kind of a while back, I didn't. When it started to play out, I was like, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember what happened." But I don't think it's like super memorable, especially compared to the rest of the movie. But it definitely exists, and I think it definitely plays out, especially kind of ties in with his bike riding and everything like that, and so yeah, kind of a sweet moment, but yeah, not the most memorable, but it's not the worst either. So okay, so last category, which is always, I feel like, a very important one, the rewatchability. What do you give this?
Again, this is a tough, I feel like, subjective. I think if you grew up watching this and you were sort of at that prime age of like say teenage years to like age 35 when it came out, which is that 20-year span there, I'd say it's a 3 in terms of, like, there is a lot of things that are very nostalgic about it that are enjoyable, even if you're just nostalgic for that type of rom-com, because they really don't make them like this anymore, at least not that are put out in theaters. So I think for people who have that memory of the film, it's a 3-star. I don't go higher because I'm worried that it's like a lot of the stuff that, in my opinion, doesn't age super well, so it might dampen the experience. Now, if you are not in those age demographics, though, I mean, rewatchability, I feel like it's a 1, maybe a 2.
Oh.
Yeah, if you're a kid and you miss the window, or if you're older, I just feel like it's one you're gonna watch it and be like, I don't get it, or I kind of get it, but there's better versions of this somewhere else.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm enjoying having you on because this you're providing a little bit different like kind of perspectives. But I had this as a 5, even though
nice.
It's got the out of touch elements and stuff. I mean, it's just I don't want to make this sound like I would write something as crude as this movie, but if I was able to create a comedy, like the flow, the jokes, like the improv nature, all the cast, just, one thing that I think is always a key to a good comedy is you can almost, in a sense, feel that the people behind the scenes are having such as good time as the people in front of the camera. And so you definitely get that aspect there. I think honestly, from Steve Carell's performance, I think he's amazing in this movie. It goes without saying, if he carries the film, and if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't be nearly as good. But I think he's amazing in here. And I do think also just from just the standpoint of like what it did in the early 2000s and how it reshaped comedy now. And I feel like even comedies are trying to find that like same sweet spot. And I haven't even seen all of them that have come out. There was that one about the boys. I can't think of it. Bad Boys, or no, it's not Bad Boys, but yeah, I'm messing it up there. But anyway, and I think finally Hollywood's kind of like been like, okay, let's throw it into like a superhero genre, right? Like Deadpool, Wolverine.
That's how we are. It's got to be pre-existing IP, but definitely superhero films. There was that No Hard Feelings, I think, last year with Jennifer.
Yeah. I was trying to do that, and people didn't see it. Really.
Well, it didn't do very well at the box office, but then it was like the #1 movie once it hit Netflix. It was like the #1 movie on Netflix for like several weeks, I guess. So I hear you. Okay, I hear you. I don't know if I want to amend my ranking here, but I do want to reiterate, I hear you. I do not want to poo-poo on this movie if you feel that way. And I do think in terms of the structure, in terms of a strong sense of comedy and comedic voice, I completely agree. I think this movie has a lot going for it. And again, I like what Judd Apatow does in general. Yeah. If you look at some of his other movies, I'd probably be like a little warmer to them given the subject matter. He understands the truth behind comedy, people, and like life's funny. I don't know. Yeah. It's good. He nails it here.
Yeah. Did you were you a Freaks and Geeks fan?
Yes. I was. Great.
Yeah. That's and I probably I know I didn't watch that TV show when it was on, but like when this movie came out, like I sought out that series. Like a roommate of mine, like one of the best birthday presents I got, he gave me a DVD box set of the Freaks and Geeks, and I watched all the episodes with all the commentaries and all the things. But if people haven't seen that show, they should check it out. I think it's streaming on Hulu, so it's really easy to find. So I think we've talked about this, but yeah, this movie as a rom-com, especially in these rankings, it's kind of interesting that it's on this list. I don't know if I'd rank it as a rom-com as great as some of the others that are on here, but as a comedy, it is interesting to think about if you were to take one film from Apatow's canon, if this would be, basically, if he passed away, is this the movie that they would showcase? I wonder.
That's a good question. I would say, just kind of glancing at his filmography as a director, I mean, this Funny People, Knocked Up, This Is 40, I think, are other. I mean, but this was one of his first, as a director, one of his first massive hits. So it's kind of tough to say. Yeah, I would say probably. I would say it's either this or Knocked Up. If I was, I would go to bat for This Is 40 personally. But I think in terms of like, what has he contributed to the film canon? He's dead. We only get to pick one of his movies to show everyone. It's probably going to be, be this movie.
Yeah, I really enjoy This Is 42, but that movie's a little too real for some people, I think. So it kind of, I know in particular with some people, it hits a little too close to home. So yeah, but to me, I think that's what I like about him. He knows how to hit those nerves for sure.
Recommendations.
Well, you're on the forefront of kind of seeing, watching what's new out there, but are there any like movies or TV shows that you've been recommending people to check out?
Yeah, so a couple of movies I just saw just this past weekend. 2 movies, 2 TV shows. I'll keep it brief. Number 1 is Rebel Ridge, which is a movie that's been a huge hit on Netflix. It's from director Jeremy Saulnier. Definitely not a rom-com. Very movie. It's mostly about this man who is trying to bail his cousin out of prison because he knows bail his cousin out before he goes to prison, because if he goes to prison, he's going to be in danger. And he runs into a little bit of a snafu with the local police in this very small, I believe it's Louisiana town, and stuff happens. That's all I'll say. Stuff happens. And it's a revenge film, but he also is the main character is nonviolent, like in terms of his approach, which makes for some really interesting fight scenes and story choices. Anyway, it's really interesting. I don't know if you've not heard of Jeremy Saulnier, this is probably a good one to join in on. He also did Green Room a few years back. So that's number 1. Number 2 is a horror thriller, Speak No Evil, that just came out in theaters just last weekend. And it's actually based on I believe it's a Danish film that came out 2 years ago. I'd seen that one. This is an American adaptation. Follows a very similar story. Stars James McAvoy. And it's really just begging the question of like, why do you let people just, why are we so afraid of being honest? Why are we so eager to trade honesty for politeness or to retain the status quo? Because essentially the movie is about this couple that's lured out into an Italian countryside by a couple they meet on a vacation. And turns out those people that they meet, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a little more that meets the eye. And maybe they are constantly just kind of whittling away at like, what are you willing to give up in order to stay polite and friendly? So great little tension there. So those are the movies. Speak No Evil now playing in theaters. Coming off of the Emmys this end of the last week, Shogun on FX is spectacular TV. One of the best things I watched, I think, all this year. It's based on a really famous novel, basically about a European who's stuck in Japan and becomes integrated into the culture as there's a major shift in the politics. I won't say more than that, but tremendous production value, great acting. I've always been interested in Japan, so great stuff. One best drama this last weekend and totally worth it. And lastly, Presumed Innocent on Apple TV Plus, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. It's just a good old fashioned, and I know it's based on a movie with Harrison Ford, but the show is a good old fashioned crime drama. It's juicy, it's fun, it's a ride. I don't know if it's great, but I will tell you I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. So.
I have lots of thoughts about Presumed Innocent. We finished that one, and I'd say it kind of slowly like went downhill a bit as each episode went along. But regardless, enjoyed watching it.
The ending's kind of I was not super crazy about the ending.
Yeah, and it's one of those. It's especially being, based on a book, that's based on a movie, like, you have to kind of play with it there. I always feel like that's hard to stick the landing. But I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal, he's one of those actors that even if like what he's in might not be the best, I mean, he's given it his all.
He shows up. He shows up, and he's always so good at identifying what kind of a role to bring bring to the movie, what kind of performance to bring to it. And yeah, I'm a big fan of his. I think his work is tremendous, and I think he really delivers in that show.
Yeah. It's worth watching, if anything, to watch him and Peter Sarsgaard kind of go at it, and just knowing the fact that their brother, their brother-in-laws in real life, it's kind of fun, like back, knowledge to have in the back of your brain, So, my recommendation, I think I'm kind of glad with fall. It kind of seems like some new stuff's coming out, maybe like. Out of the writer's strike, maybe there's kind of some things like finally developing, but we started English Teacher, which is on FX on Hulu. Nice. Have you seen that? Yeah,
I have not.
Yeah, so it's a comedy, just not a sitcom, so to speak, but just about this English teacher in high school, and it's actually kind of interesting to almost compare to this movie because it touches on the touchy subjects, but handles it in a completely different way, so it's kind of it's very much a comedy, but also is touching on this, like, especially with the public school, how do you handle issues such as gender and other things like that. And it's really, really funny. I really like it. It's kind of like in my wheelhouse of like shows I really like. It's very funny, but also it has a little bit more there. It's trying to kind of say something. So yeah, I think people should check that out. And I think that's rolling out like a new episode every Tuesday or something like that. So
great. I love it. I don't know about you. I generally prefer the week to week versus the binge model most of the time.
Yeah, me as well. So anyway, well, thank you so much for doing this. And I know at the beginning you kind of talked a little bit about your podcast and everything, but where can people find your podcast, read your reviews, and all those good things? Yeah,
all the reviews are going to be coming out. The podcast is called the Cinematic Schematic. You can find it at the Cinematropolis.com. We're about to come back from a hiatus very shortly. We're going to be reviewing Megalopolis, which is Francis Ford Coppola's return to directing for the first time in a very long time. Very excited about that, as he financed the entire movie himself. Kind of crazy. Looking forward to that. So that's coming up, what we have coming up. And then obviously spooky season's around the corner. So we'll have some good horror films reviewing as well. But yeah, that's the Cinematic Schematic. You can find it at the Cinematropolis.com or look up the Cinematic Schematic wherever your podcasts are found.
Awesome. Yeah, great. Thanks so much for doing this. And I'm going to bring in Whitney later just because this was one of the movies she sat and watched with me. And so she had seen before as well. But anyway, it'll be interesting to get her perspective on it. But also to talk, I didn't even tell you this, not that it super matters, but this is going to be the 100th episode of this podcast.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm privileged. Well, firstly, thank you for reaching out, inviting me to be on your show. I owe you a favor now. I have to have you on my show next. But it's an honor to be on episode 100. That's a huge milestone, man. Congratulations. 100 episodes. Most podcasts don't make it past like episode 5. And so you're still rocking.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's taken me a little while to get there, but it's fun. So, and I appreciate you being able to talk about this movie. I probably shouldn't say this, but Whitney was like, you're not going to talk about your sex life on here. I was like, no. That is not what's happening here. It's not a Dr. Ruth situation here. So yeah, but anyway, well, thanks again. And looking forward to seeing what you're watching this fall.
Absolutely. Well, Nathan, it's always a pleasure. Looking forward to catching up with you again soon.
Okay. Take care. Okay, well, I'm welcoming in Whitney. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Doing well. So I just spoke to Caleb Masters all about the 40-Year-Old Virgin, and so we don't necessarily have to break it down, but we did watch this together. And so I just wanted to get your quick take on it because I don't know if we've watched this film together, have we?
I don't know. Didn't we? When did it come out?
Well, it came out in 2005.
So no. Probably not.
Yeah. So when we watched it this time, was it a film that you had, do you feel like you've seen it a lot before?
Yeah, I think I saw it like a couple times back then. I mean, I don't think I've seen it more than I think that might have been my third time to see it.
Okay.
I think I saw scenes from it.
Yeah.
Like the shaving scene or the waxing scene and things like that, but I don't think I saw it like from start to finish.
Yeah. So how do you think it held up? Like, did you enjoy it this time?
Yeah, I did. I actually enjoyed it more. For some reason, I believe that in my brain that she was mad at him for being a virgin and that's why they broke up instead of the reason why she was mad at him. And so the whole time I remember thinking the movie kind of angered me
Yeah.
because I thought that was a weird thing to be mad about.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. So, like, I didn't remember. So I remembered it incorrectly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you think, were you surprised by the vulgarity of the film?
Well, no, because of the title and all the people that were in it.
Right.
But, yeah, the first time around, yes, I was like, I can't believe I'm watching this. But no, not so much this time.
Not so much.
No.
You've just been hardened.
I don't think they could make a movie like that any longer. Like, there was things that are just considered, like, not PC anymore or totally inappropriate. Also, they were making fun of him to an extent when I think he would be in a class where you just couldn't make fun of him.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I think that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I've always liked this movie. I've always enjoyed Judd Apatow's films. I thought this was interesting because I guess it is a rom-com from the way you look at it, like kind of the tropes. But when we did our rankings, we found that it doesn't really pass the test. It really becomes a rom-com like at the third act. But really, this is just more of a movie about Andy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a rom-com.
No.
And I think that there's a lot of movies like that are like dirty and raunchy that didn't make the list that also have a story of like relationship in it. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mind watching this film with you because one of the first movies you told me about when we met, that it was one of your favorite films. What was it?
Well,
Why are you blinking now?
because I
You're getting embarrassed.
I know all the signs of it, but I forgot the name of it.
You forgot that.
About apple pie?
American Pie.
American Pie. I know it wasn't called About Apple Pie. I was asking if that's the one. It's because I love him.
You love Jason Biggs.
I love Jason Biggs. He's my call card. What's that person I get like 5 people or whatever? He's my person.
Your hall pass?
My hall pass. That's right. This is not the time for me.
Not the time. It's only 8:09.
I know, but I can't remember things. But I love American Pie movies.
Yeah.
You know who else loves American Pie movies?
Who?
I'm going to be in trouble for this one.
What?
My dad. My dad loves them. That's who I saw it with.
Did you have similar awkward conversations like he has with his dad in the movie?
Probably about band camp and stuff. Like, I just think it's hilarious. I love those movies, but they're not on your list.
No, well, that's not really a rom-com.
I know, but neither's this. That's proving the point, right?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get your quick thoughts, but also just I thought it was apt to bring you in. You haven't been on all the episodes, but this indeed is the 100th episode of this podcast. How do you feel about that?
Great. You know why?
Why?
Because I was just watching a TV show, and it was their 119th episode, and they're about to be syndicated, so I feel like 19 more episodes than we're in.
So I've just got to get to the 119.
Yep. That's my new philosophy.
Well, I appreciate you being patient with me through this. It's a little crazy that I've done 100 of these.
Yeah, it is.
Like, do you think we can make the next 100?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as I'm on them. I'm the life of the party over here.
Yeah. So we only have a couple more rom-coms left. So we've got to find a new area
A new
to tackle.
genre?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do thriller.
And no, you're not. Or horror.
No. I'm out.
And we can't do romantic comedy.
And you can't do old ones.
Why?
I don't like black and white films. Or subtitles. I don't want to do that either.
We put subtitles on things all the time now.
I do like subtitles just to hear it, but only I don't want other subtitles.
Yeah.
That's true. I guess I could have subtitles. I made Nathan watch an entire series because it was a book that I read, and I love the book. But the series was made in...
Oh, it's Swedish.
Sweden. Yeah, Swedish. And
Or Dutch, maybe?
I don't know. But they just dubbed over them in English language. And we watched the whole thing like that, and it never matched up. The lips never matched up, but it was good. I liked it.
It was good. Hallie was out after the first episode.
Yeah, she was like, nope, can't do it.
What was it called? Do you remember?
I don't ever remember anything. It was by the author that
Beartown.
that wrote Beartown, Frederick Breckman. See, I know things like
Yeah.
that. And he wrote another book, and I loved it. I don't know the name. I'll have to look it up for you.
If we had a producer,
Yeah.
maybe that should be a goal in this next 100 episode range
Yeah.
of getting
Find a producer.
to help us with this. But
Yeah.
it's only 6 episodes. It's on Netflix. So good luck to our audience.
Yeah, good luck. Enjoy.
Well, anything to say?
We'll
to
put
our-
it in the comments.
anything to say? To
That's
our-
all I had to say about the 40-year-old virgin.
I think. Do you have more to say about it?
No, not really. Do you feel sorry for him and those guys making fun of him, or do you feel like he found his people?
Oh, no, I definitely, that's what we kind of talked about a little bit. Caleb kind of mentioned, like, at the time when he was younger watching it, he was like, oh, those guys are the best. But viewing it with older eyes now, we were kind of like, those guys really weren't that great of friends.
No.
Yeah.
And Paul Rudd, he's always nice, and he's not nice in this movie.
No, he's not.
No.
So, well, anything you want to leave our listeners with? Like, any thanks or no?
Yeah, thanks for listening. Put in a request for me to be the guest because I really enjoy myself in here.
Put in a request.
Yeah,
What was
the
that?
people
Yeah, how will they? Well, how will the people get to me?
on your email.
Through
That
you.
on your email thing that you're going to give at the end.
Yeah, moviesarealivepod@gmail.com.
Or just call Nathan and tell him.
Or just text Whitney for her to yell at me to have her on more.
Yeah.
So you just have to be willing to talk about the movies that sometimes might not fit in your box.
Oh, I'll talk about them. You just might not like what I have to say.
The problem is, how am I going to keep you awake during those type
I'll
of films?
stay awake.
You will. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for sticking with us this far, and I'm real excited about this, about seeing where this is headed.
Yeah, 100. That's old. You're an old man.
All right. Bye.
Bye.